Crises of Humanity, Chapter-4, Biosphere Dashing Toward Extinction. Our biosphere is already in a new phase of extinction. The number of living species has been drastically declining since about 1980, and the biosphere is thought to be in a new extinction period, the sixth in the Earth's history. Living creatures have experienced virtual annihilation 5 times every 100 million years, caused by the changes in the Earth's environment. Each time, only a few species of living creatures that had managed to survive extremely harsh conditions, such as covered in ice, hit by an immense volcanic eruption, or crash of asteroids, to relay the hope of life to us here in the present age. The number of living species currently in existence is said to be several million to several tens of millions. The number varies depending on the scientist, and the exact number is virtually impossible to obtain. Having said so, a rough assumption of 10 million would not be unreasonable when people like us out on the street think about our future. Scientists believe that it took 10,000 to 1 million years for living creatures to be virtually annihilated due to the past fluctuations of Mother Nature. Assuming there were 10 million living species, and it took 100,000 years to become total extinct, the pace of extinction was 100 species per year. According to conservation ecologists, at the moment 200 species are disappearing from the planet every day due to human beings' activities. Taking the smaller side of 100 species per day, even then, about 35,000 species are annihilated annually, and at this rate, all living creatures would disappear within 300 years. This pace is 300 to 400 times faster than the age when 100 species became extinct annually, caused by changes inflicted by Mother Nature. Some scientists say the pace is actually more than 1,000 times faster. Considering such figures, we cannot help but think that the sixth extinction stage has already started at an immensely brisk pace. Imagine a chronological table of living species history on a scale of 1 million years. All the living creatures would disappear in an instant at around 2100 AD. This is how devastating human beings' impact is. Human beings and large-sized animals at the apex of the ecological pyramid would disappear when living creatures at the bottom of the pyramid decline. It's not logical to believe that only large animals survive or be protected by somebody. Large animals would also disappear at some stage, and human beings cannot be immune to that fate. Quasi-living creatures, such as new strains of viruses and lethal drug-resistant bacteria, are proliferating. This just might be the Earth giving feedback through its regulatory function in response to the explosion of human beings. Man-made causes of the extinction of living species. Reason for human existence. For billions of years, living beings have managed through solidarity to proliferate. But what are human beings, the self-avowed lords of creation, doing for the sake of other lives? Have brains, the cells that human beings are proud of, been bestowed to us for the sake of the prosperity of the biosphere? When I think about life, I always return to this question. Living species started to be annihilated due to human beings' mass consumption and residual pollution. Juxtaposing the causes, deforestation might come first. Tropical rainforests, in particular, are indispensable habitats for the survival of a wide spectrum of species, and therefore, the majority of the extinction of living creatures is happening in the tropical rainforest zones. The main causes of deforestation are harvesting timber in poor countries to produce construction and/or paper-making materials for export to rich countries, and reclamation of forests to create fields for agricultural commodities and/or feed for domestic animals. When we have an urge to taste imported meat, we should simultaneously think of the deforested and deserted tropical rainforests. Viewed from the stratosphere, wildfires have become conspicuous globally. The cause of these fires may not only be rising temperatures due to global warming, but also the increasingly strong wind velocity. One wildfire I witnessed from the sky was under the Siberian flight route and extended approximately 500 kilometers long, emitting a large amount of smoke. Chemical substances are another major cause of the extinction. Tens of thousands types of chemical substances, including fertilizers and/or pesticides, are on the market. Most of the substances do not exist naturally and therefore are chemically stable. Those substances move all over the earth on the vehicle of water and atmosphere circulations, and once condensed through the process of ecological chain, would damage animals' reproduction functions. As a result, the biosphere is collapsing as no child, fry, or baby birds are born. Recently, degraded and micronized plastics are damaging living creatures. Even in my own narrow world, the number of birds has drastically declined in recent years, which might be due to the adverse effects of chemical substances. Swallows that used to line up on electric power cables, preparing for their migration south, have decreased radically. Silent Spring comes to mind. In my childhood, I spent lots of time playing with little birds. I can clearly say that the population has declined tangibly. Considering the fact that more than 100 living species are disappearing every day, this might be a natural phenomenon. Climate changes also heavily affect living creatures. Organisms live by adapting to the environment surrounding them. Once a climate has altered, they move somewhere else and adapt to the new environment for survival. Plants that are immovable blow or have animals or birds carry their seeds to change their habitats through each generation. As the transport speed of plants is slow, they cannot keep up with the latitudinal movement of the isothermal line. Animals that cohabitate with specific plants would disappear together with the plants. Even with the current global warming of less than 1 degree Celsius, in the northern hemisphere, the isothermal line moves 50 kilometers to the north and 50 meters upward vertically every 10 years. It is said that the maximum speed of the isothermal line's movement, to which living creatures can still adapt, is roughly 5 kilometers horizontally and 5 meters vertically every 10 years. If that is the case, suitable habitats are racing away 10 times faster than the creature's adaptability. Pretty and lovely alpine flora and polar bears have nowhere to go. Living creatures that are incapable of catching up with climate changes are disappearing. Any further rise in the air temperature would accelerate the pace of living species extinction. As I already explained, the jet stream started exhibiting unprecedented snaking around 1980. When the jet stream moves in a north-south direction, surface weather is disturbed and living creatures' habitats lose stability and deteriorate. The invasion of alien species is also a major cause of extinction of species. Alien species of both flora and fauna that moved in due to global warming or were carried in are expanding at an explosive pace, as there are no natural predators in their new habitats. They drive indigenous species out and ruin biodiversity. These alien flora and fauna have become highly visible around me. Biodiversity has also been heavily damaged through the reduction in marshes caused by development and single-crop farming. I need to point out human beings' monopolization of water. We consume water, the springhead of life, exclusively, including the sources of water for living creatures. Failing to return it to the soil, we pollute the water and drain away sewage. Thus, potable water for all living creatures runs dry. In particular, lengthy sewage pipes in rural, mountainous villages where housing is sparse shortcuts the water circulation, which decreases the places where living creatures get access to water. Simultaneously, the sewage system installation costs per house are high, due to the length of the connecting pipe necessary between houses. Even from the point of view of human beings' interests, installation of large-sized sewage systems in rural villages lacks justifiability. Nowadays, the purification performance of small combination septic tanks is extremely high, to the extent that even mountain trout can live in purified sewage water. By returning the polluted water purified by small combination septic tanks to the soil, we can maintain abundant water resources, and installation costs per house could be saved. I strongly believe that large-sized sewage systems should be limited to overcrowded megalopolises, which would contribute to maintaining biodiversity. The large-scale sewage systems currently in operation have limited purification performance, despite the aid of microorganisms, water purification power, and immense efforts in science and technology. As a result, the effluents from those systems still contains pollutants that are harmful to marine organisms. Oceans absorb 1/3 of the enormous volume of carbon dioxide generated by human beings. Consequently, the acidification of seawater is advancing, causing the depletion of phytoplankton such as algae that comprise the foundation of the ecological pyramid. This fact denotes that the very foundation of the ecological system in the ocean is on the verge of collapse. Phytoplankton is the green forest of the sea and the backbone of all marine life. Acidification of the sea has brought adversity to shellfish and crustaceans that require calcium to create their shells. Coral reefs are also damaged by the high acidity of seawater. Thus, fish are deprived of their sanctuary, and biodiversity in the sea is diminishing. Generally speaking, marine currents are driven by the difference in the seawater temperatures between the Arctic and equatorial zones, and the difference in the saline density. In the northern hemisphere, currents warmed up in the equatorial zone flow northbound and release heat in the Arctic zone. The cooled down and now heavier currents flow southbound on the ocean floor, which again gain heat at the equatorial zone and well upwards. The problem is that the temperature increase due to climate change varies between the equatorial and Arctic zones. Assuming that the temperature in the equatorial zone rises by 1 degree Celsius, that in the Arctic zone would rise by 3 degrees Celsius, 3 times as much. If the temperature gap between the Arctic and equatorial zone changes, both the position and volume of marine currents would be altered. The marine ecosystem and biodiversity would deteriorate, and needless to say, fishery would significantly decline. When it comes to the nuclear waste pollution that has been generated by human beings' ephemeral greed, it will remain with us for tens to hundreds of thousands of years. Even if the waste can be perfectly stored and segregated utilizing science and technology, we would be burdened with futile management costs and forced labor for nothing for the human beings during the period of some tens of thousands of years. What if human beings were annihilated during that period? The storage system would collapse, causing the pollution to diffuse through the Earth's circulation. The condensed pollution that would accumulate in the bodies of both land and sea-dwelling creatures would damage their reproduction functions and prevent progeneration. As stated in the addendum, it is highly likely that nuclear power plants will be targeted by terrorism or could even risk a missile attack. It is unrealistic to ignore these risks when talking about the safety of nuclear power plants. The safety of nuclear power plants cannot be realistically addressed without paying attention to these risks. I believe that scientific safety standards are only one part of the safety issue. Contemporary human life is only 200,000 years old. When I think about the many causes of the extinction of living species, I am always bemused. What is the reason for human existence, including myself, in the circle of life? End of Chapter 4.